Awesome. And let me get these closed captions on. Perfect. All right. I'll pass it off to you, Megan.
Okay, perfect. Well, welcome everyone to our Becoming Tech series. This is the first in a series of four programs that we do. And today is sort of the thinking tech of what we were talking about is the growth and fixed mindset. So my name is Megan Penley Pickett. I am currently a senior team lead on our student advising team. So if you are coming into the program, once you are matriculated and in the program, you'll be assigned to someone who is on my team. And if you're already here, you're probably already working with someone, potentially me, but potentially other people on the team. So we are glad that you are here. Whoops. So what we're going to focus on today is really the idea behind this series is to prepare students for the tech field, which is why you were all here or thinking about coming here to begin with. And so really talking about that idea of growth and fixed mindset, what the difference is between the two. Give me 1 second. The wind keeps blowing my door open and my son is listening to his audiobook out there. And I'm like, you can also listen to Harry Potter with us. So we're going to talk about growth and fixed mindset. Neither one of them is the right or wrong mindset to have. Excuse me. There are just different times when the different mindsets will serve us. So we'll get into that. We have some graduates that are serving on our panel with us today. They are the meat of the program, really. And so definitely want to get to Dwayne and Sarah being on there. We'll have some questions and answers for them, takeaways, and then we will have obviously, if you have any general questions, we'll open it up to our participants who are here. It looks like Harry Potter is it, so apologies if that's in the background. I cannot keep that door shut. And then we will have a link, a survey link in the chat towards the end. We just ask that if you have the ability to fill that out, to go ahead and do that. That helps us really tailor our programming to be able to meet the needs of our participants. So we will go right ahead and get started. So this is sort of a little quiz to set us up in the beginning. And so if you want to go ahead and you can think about this, feel free if you want to drop your answer in the chat, you absolutely can do that. But you don't need to. So I'll give everybody just sort of like 30 seconds more to read through this and sort of choose between A and B on each one. Much like in anything, it's not an always or never. It's just sort of like typically that type of thing. So this first one is choosing between I'm either good at something or I'm not. And B on that one is I can improve my skills with effort and practice. Really, there's no judgment. Again, there's no right or wrong answer on what category you tend to fall into. And sometimes it can be very situational. And so we want to keep that in mind as well. And so for me, it does vary a little bit. I typically fall into I can improve my skills with effort and practice. Not that I'm good at everything or anything in particular, but I don't tend to be naturally good at anything because I sort of hang back a little bit when I am starting something new. So I don't tend to really flourish out of the gate, if you will. And so time over time, practice is how I get better at things, just as an example. The next one, when A is when people give me feedback, it feels like criticism. And B is I appreciate when people give me feedback. It helps me learn and grow. Again, I think for me, it's probably as much as I really want to be in the in the category of like, it helps me learn and grow, which I absolutely believe. My initial response is it feels like criticism. Can I learn and grow from that? Absolutely. Have I learned to take that over my many decades on Earth? Absolutely. But that's sort of where that falls in for me. Again, just to give uh, some there. And so it looks like Dwayne on here is a B, learn and grow, which is why he is here today for sure. Same for Sarah, same for other people. So I think that's great, that it gives you, that it's learning and growing. And I think that again, there's no right way or wrong way. I think that recognizing which category we fall into and how that serves us can help us frame when we are in situations. Number 3, so our last one here is A, failure means it is time to give up. And B, I only truly fail when I stop trying. If people want to sort of drop their answers really quickly in there. Let's see what we are getting. And for those of you who are just joining us, we're just getting started with the growth mindset versus fixed mindset idea. And we're doing a bit of a quiz to help us give some context to it for us. And so I think really for number 3, failing at something really, it hurts when we don't do well, at least the initial sting. How long we stay in that period sometimes depends on what it is that we're not doing well in, or who saw us not do well in that. I always tell people, I don't mind messing up, but I love specifically to do it in public, right? Said nobody ever. And so it really can be a sign to tell us not to go forward sometimes when we do fail. However, if you've lived long enough, like some of us, myself, I'm sure, that we've all experienced failing at something. And if you haven't, please tell me your secret of not failing at things, because that would be really great. We can figure out a way to maybe bottle that a little bit. And it really should be when we do fail, however we want to define that, right? It's an indicator to reroute, review, maybe retry, maybe go in again, that reroute, go in a different direction, which is different than I've just stopped, but I'm choosing to do something different with my time. So that is, Dwayne has a secret. What is your secret, Dwayne? I'd love to hear it.
Failure is only halftime.
It's only halftime?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, like in a game. I
Yeah.
was like, what do you do with the other half? I get it. It's in a game.
You only truly fail if you quit the game.
Okay. See, this is why he's on here, folks. We're going to get to him really quickly because he has some secrets to share for sure. So, so perfect. Well, thank you. Hopefully that gives you all, again, it's just meant to be brief, but gives you some context for growth mindset versus fixed mindset. So now we're going to get into really what that is. And so we'll unpack here the differences between growth and fixed mindset. As you can see illustrated here, the concept of growth mindset is attributed to Angela Duckworth, is an author that I'd really recommend. She wrote the book Grit, which came out probably in the last 5 years. I don't remember the publication date, but she identified characteristics of both types of mindsets, which we'll discuss in detail. I'm not going to read all of this to you, but I think that really highlighting, again, there's no right or wrong answer. You definitely only ever want to be in growth mindset, and fixed mindset is negative, or vice versa. Excuse me, but as we're thinking about you all making your foray into the tech field from somewhere else, the idea of adopting a growth mindset or pulling some of these characteristics in and practicing them can help to thrive in that area, to sort of change your perspective somewhat. And recognizing when you are fixed in a mindset and why you might be fixed, right? Focusing on proving yourself, which absolutely makes sense, especially in a new field when you are making a career change. Both of our graduate panelists have done that, so they can speak about that. And so believing that talent is static. This is something that I hear from students often, whether it's in student advising while you're in the program, or I got my start at Flatiron School as a career coach. This was often the mindset that some of our newly minted graduates also had of, everybody has more talent than me, right? Versus talent is ever improving. I'm at, level A today, and I will be at, level B later on. Think about it like when you are in kindergarten, right? There's not much that you know about being in a school setting, right? And you sort of look at these older students in school and think, oh my gosh, they know what they're doing. Maybe we didn't have that language in kindergarten, right? So then think about when there are third graders who are like 7 and 8 years old, right? I have a fourth grader right now. And so they're not that old, but they know that much more than kindergartners. They don't know as much as fifth and sixth graders, but you know more than a kindergartner. So it just continues to grow. So that's the idea of that growth mindset, is knowing just that much more than you did the day before. That growth mindset is really where we're embracing it as constructive feedback. Even if our initial, like myself, even if our initial hearing of that pings that's criticism, what do I want to do with it type mindset, we move through that to get to how can I embrace this as constructive feedback, being inspired by others versus threatened by others' success. Some of this is also, let me be clear, some of this is also dictated by our environment, and how we are showing up in our environment, and what that environment is triggering for us. So again, it's not just a black and white fixed versus growth mindset. There are contributing factors that can make a difference in there. And really the most important difference that we can see, in what's illustrated here and to think about is that the idea of not yet. Essentially, the not yet concept allows us to believe that we can do anything and removes the power of failure and mistakes. For example, you may not know Python yet, or you may not be able to be a product designer yet, but the proper mindset and effort, you will be soon. You will get there. You'll have more information and skills tomorrow than you did today. One of my favorite Angela Duckworth quotes is, "Success is never final. Failure is never fatal. It's courage that counts." To Dwayne's point, right? It's courage to go on to that second half, taking in all of this information, all of these quote unquote failures, right? And having the courage to move on to something that's important to you, and saying that it is important to you and that it counts is really all about your mindset. And so, want to point out a few sort of core concepts in growth mindset that I think are really useful for students preparing for the tech industry. And we'll briefly talk about each one. And so thinking that intelligence can be improved, this is the idea is that we know that you're smart, you're here, you're in the program, or you're thinking about the program, right? You're working on that pre-work, prep work right now. This is the idea that you can learn something new. And this is, again, really key when entering the tech field. You're going to encounter new technologies, new ways to use that technology, new framework, new, right? All of the time. And so having that idea of, I don't need to know this right out of the gate, but I know I can learn it, and applying ways that you've done that successfully in the past, is really this thinking intelligence can be improved. Growth mindset really does require you to embrace challenges, and you have to put in the work to strengthen your overcomer muscle, right? It's, again, all of this, especially if you've been much like myself, in a fixed mindset, and that's primarily, again, not negative, but moving into that growth mindset, that takes practice. It takes believing that you can do that. And it's new behaviors, it's new thoughts, it's new feelings, it's new behaviors that come along with that. So you are strengthening your overcomer muscle there. And a challenge will present itself during your boot camp, and how you respond to that challenge matters. Debugging code comes to mind, right? Oh my gosh, I don't know what to do about this. What are your resources? How are you going to do this? What are your strategies? So you don't give up and stay in that space, right? If you embrace the challenge and overcome, it matters. It matters to your brain. It's sort of starting an avalanche of positivity of, oh, if I overcame once, maybe I can overcome again. Or what did I do that time that I overcame? And then you start building that muscle. I've witnessed more than a few students encounter a challenge and allow that challenge to prevent them from reaching their goals of completing their program, and becoming a tech professional. And so I've also seen way more students that embraced that challenge and conquered it, overcame it, resulting in pride and a confidence boost, right? And so it's predicated on one another. And so mastering persistence is a third piece, is a third core concept. It really just comes down to not quitting when it's difficult, code when it's hard, right? And so you got to keep going. You have to figure out those ways. Again, what are those strategies? How do you take breaks? How do you build a schedule that matters for you so you can keep going? It's really easy to simply not make eye contact with your coursework, especially for our friends in the flex programs. It's really easy to not do that and then be like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? So that persistence piece, how you spend your time every day, positively or negatively, impacts, how you are moving through the world. And so it's that continuous, taking continuous action, even if it's at a different time, it's a different action each day, but doing something continuously really brings about that persistence. Celebrating small wins is that next one. And small obviously is in quotes because people want to really categorize things as small and big. Graduation is a big win, and it is a big win. I don't want to diminish that, but also getting through your prep work is a big win. Getting that first lab, having that first one-on-one with your instructor, those are small wins that if you keep going with persistence, if you keep moving through, then you really are able to build those small wins. And again, it starts boosting that confidence. It's celebrating effort and not just results, right? Oh, I was able to sit down and I followed the schedule I had for myself more than one day, right? I did that for 2 days. Now I've done that for 3 days and 5 days. Or when you have taken a vacation or an unintentional break from the program and you've come back, you've put together a schedule and you're moving through it. Wow, I was able to do that. That's a huge win, but it sort of falls into our small win because you're moving towards a larger goal. So just remember that really does make a difference. And really thinking about what your aha moment is when you have it. If you are working in the program, share that with your student advisor. They can absolutely provide that perspective for you when you want to say, oh, I just finished this lab, and you want to downplay it. They're like, oh my gosh, congratulations, that's huge, and here's how I've seen that play out. So definitely share it with other people as well, to get some of that validation. And then lastly, the piece that I want to really highlight on this slide here is remembering the big picture, which is really focusing on that goal and knowing that every decision that you make matters. Not to add any more anxiety than what you might need in a boot camp in a very short amount of time, whether you're on the 15-week or 60-week cadence, it's still a fairly short amount of time. And I think it just, really make a big difference when you are thinking about why you joined the program. Most of you are coming as career changers. You want to get into something that allows you to use skills that you are good at, problem solving skills. You want to get into a field where you have the ability to make more money, have more upward mobility, can work from wherever. There's so many reasons that students want to get into this program. So remembering that on those days when it feels like, oh my gosh, am I ever going to get this project done? Or I'm really having trouble with this particular concept. And you're working through these other areas of growth mindset, but to really come back to that why really, really does make a difference. And so setting those smaller goals that link up to the bigger picture really does make a difference, whether that is I'm going to get these labs done, or when I, hit this mark, I'm going to be able to take a break, right? If I can move through this curriculum a little quicker, I can go on my summer vacation and not be behind, right? So and then still stay on for my program end date. So really thinking about that as well. So I promise we're getting to the part where I'm not going to be talking so much. There's a lot of information that comes along with these. And so, whoops, right before we get there, one more, and then we're going to get to our graduate panelists, which again are really going to be able to provide a lot of context for this. This is just an image that we have found, right? Here's your plan. And as a student advisor, we have these plans. We talk with students all the time, I'm just going to do more. I'm just going to get as much done as I can. No hurdles are going to come up between now and 2 weeks from now when I talk with you. And I always tell students, I believe that you believe that, but when we plan for what reality might be, when we think about what are the obstacles that might come up, either long-term or in the next 2 weeks, we can start to plan for that and know that it's not a failure, right? And it's really rare, just so you know, it's really rare for a student's exact linear plan to work out as expected. Many students begin their program expecting it to be this straight line that you see on top with little interruptions. We expect that there's no hiccups, emergencies, or really opportunities for improvement. I'm just going to be able to go in. I'm going to ride that excitement from starting the program. And so sometimes when things go unplanned or something unexpected happens, people are blindsided, and your confidence really takes a big hit, which in turn then your progress takes a big hit. Not something that you can't come back from. I'm not saying that, but just knowing that reality looks very different than what our plan is. So when we plan for the unexpected, when we plan for how am I going to maximize the time in how I see it now, helps you re-track on that track. I call it re-railing, right? If you get derailed, how do you re-rail onto that track? But with a growth mindset, with that idea of there is opportunity for improvement, that failure is halftime, or maybe it's even just the first quarter, right? Depending on how much more we have in the program in front of us, how do we get back in the game? How do we get off the bench to re-enter that game that's already in progress? I'm glad you said that. It feels like a very good analogy for me to use, Joanne. In reality, it really is something is going to come up. Whether you're in the 15-week live campus program or the 60-week flex program, something is going to come up. And so just really thinking about how do I want to make it through? What is my plan for if I get derailed, right? And so talk with your student advisor about what reality could look like. Don't beat yourself up. It's easier said than done, but beating yourself up is only reinforcing that you have done something wrong, and you haven't. You can't control when you or others get sick, or you have to be their caretaker, or you have to work more because something has changed either in your working life or the working life of other people, or you've just hit a bump for whatever reason. You thought you had more time, and now you're realizing that it's all okay. the idea with the growth mindset is that I'm going to get back in the game. I may have to work a little bit harder for a little bit, for a sprint, and then I'm sort of back on track. So definitely work with your student advisor on that. And so really thinking about sort of those dips and valleys. And please know that it's easier to have a growth mindset when things are going well. It's easy for me to sit here and be like, just plan for the unexpected, right? And then the unexpected happens in my life. And I'm like, what the heck am I going to do now? Right? Like what am I going to draw on? And so really thinking about that. But it's more difficult and sometimes more important to have a growth mindset when you are in these lulls and the lower parts of your process. When you find yourself in a slump, please lean on your Flatiron School community, whether it's peers, instructors, pair with the technical coach as resources, or it's your advisors to help pull you out and remind you of how far you've come. We as student advisors are more than happy to remind you of your ability to succeed when you might forget. Okay. So now we get to talk with our graduate panelists. Now that we have a foundation of understanding of the growth and fixed mindset. So our first panelist is Sarah Lowing, a recent graduate of Flatiron School. I had the pleasure of being Sarah's student advisor and watching her progress. I was in the front row of that. She's a data science graduate. And then I worked with our second panelist, Dwayne Weller, in the software engineering program. I actually worked with him while I was still working as a career coach. So this is actually one of the first times we get to be back together in the same space in at least over a year and a half. It's probably coming up on 2 years for that. So this is a full circle for all of us. I'll give both panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves and share a little bit about their Flatiron journey. We'll go with Sarah first and then pop over to Dwayne. And after introductions and you all share for a few minutes, there's a few questions that I will ask to sort of kick that off. And then we will see if there are any questions from our panelists. So participants. That's what I meant. If there's any questions from our participants, if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat. Panelists, I will go ahead and sort of moderate that part of it. And then we can obviously open it up for people to unmute themselves once we get through our scheduled Q&A. So as promised, I will stop talking and I will also stop sharing my screen for right now. And Sarah, if you want to take it away, and then we'll move over to Dwayne.
Okay, great. Well, hello everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm always very thrilled to participate in these conversations. I guess my very brief bio is that before coming to Flatiron, I worked for 10 years in education and in nonprofit work. And because of a need for some greater flexibility with my time and physical space in order to attend to some elder care, I decided that I needed a very big change in my life. And going to that growth mindset, I thought back on the path of my life, and I thought to myself, what would I do if I were not afraid of my own self? And that was the point at which I decided to go and take the little test for the application to Flatiron, because I had a very clear fork in my road where I chose education over programming and data. And I wanted to revisit that with a little bit more confidence. And I have to say that was a very big success for me for a lot of different reasons. Like, I was well situated to transition from the job that I had into a more official role for somebody that I had been working with while I was in the Flex program. And I'm also going to say that it took a certain amount of relentless enthusiasm to tackle this. But I also feel like if I can do it, that we've all taken that test to get into the program. And if you've gotten in, I it's my heartfelt belief that if you are persistent, you can make it through too.
Great. Thank you. Oh, I was going to say, go ahead, Dwayne.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon or evening, everyone. My name is Dwayne. My journey actually started out when I was a teenager in New York. I grew up in a very ancient time period. Some of you might identify as the 90s. And time frame, there was only one computer in the household. I was very curious and kind of enamored by the idea of having another screen to look at because I was used to video games by then. I was a big gamer. And once I realized what the internet was, how much access you got to have to the world, I started digging. I ended up in the space of Napster. I kind of went the wrong direction that you want to go when you start out with computers. And I was downloading a lot of information I technically wasn't supposed to have. And this is just music and music videos and video games and stuff like that. But in my adult life, I got into warehousing, and on the side, I worked on cars and led to motorcycles. And they all essentially started out with the same thing. I was fascinated by vehicles. I dug into what they were about and started working on them. But that drifted me away from computers. And then in getting into that career world, and this is where that fixed mindset comes in, I focused more in survival mode and I stopped exploring. And I got really good at where I was as far as working a daytime job, working on cars and motorcycles on the side. And that was my routine for a very long time until it got abruptly interrupted when I started learning more about, just the world around me, the bigger picture, what's more important than just, working your whole life. And it was a lot of innovation that was going on that I was excited about. Things that Facebook was doing, things that Google was doing that I didn't get to touch base with. And then prior to at the late end of 2019, I ended up losing my job, and then I decided instead of going back into the field I was working in, that I was going to start self-teaching. And that was a huge thing for me because I just got into everything. I mean, I was learning JavaScript, HTML, CSS, Python. I touched a little bit of C++. Like it was just chaos. And I decided to sign up for the program so I can get one, a bit of structure with my education, but two, I need a community. I needed to understand how exactly to get into this field the proper way. Not being a student, I didn't want to wait 4 years. And actually, when I started to talk about things that'll get in your way, nobody foresaw a global pandemic starting the week I started. That's what I had to deal with. But it was difficult. However, it was just a decision. I wasn't working. This was my way to make a change, and I needed to do it sooner than later. So I just made it work. I finished up in a little less than a year. Got connected with Megan, and it was another stretch. I thought I was being stretched technologically, but it was another stretch having to learn different things compared to how I was doing things. I got my last job through a recommendation in 2015, and prior to that, I lived in a time frame where you hand in a resume, you're most likely going to hear back the same week. Whether it's a yes or no, you're going to hear back the same week. People communicated a whole lot more that way, so it wasn't as much of a stretch to get a job. I had to learn completely different methods, different ways of communicating. I had to learn a lot of grit, the continuous process of doing a lot, expecting failure, and continuing to go. And I learned from Megan how to really think through that, how to really apply that and grow through that. And that led to me getting my first position. I wasn't actually happy with my first position, but because of what I learned from Megan, I kept digging, I kept building relationships. And through those relationships, I got a position with Home Depot. And that's where I've been for the last 2.5 years.
Awesome. Thank you both for sharing that. Can you let everybody know, both of you, before we get into the Q&A, if you went through the live and campus program or if you went through the flex program, just to give some context?
I went through the flex program.
Okay. And you, sorry.
I was also flex.
Okay, perfect. Great. Well, our first question is to Sarah and Dwayne. Can you provide an example of when you needed a growth mindset while working through your phases? So really thinking about when you were in the program, when did a growth mindset serve you?
Throughout the entire process, like every single moment of it. Oh, goodness. I feel like it would have been very, very challenging for me to take on such a radical shift in like knowledge acquisition, and also the pace, without really having like at my very core, the idea that it was possible to do those things, because it was certainly not necessarily how I viewed myself before starting the program.
So for me personally, I am very easily distracted if I didn't make that clear in my last statement. So starting the program, going through the courses, I struggled with a lot in the beginning. I was going through them 4, 5, 6 times to try to get them and still wasn't getting them. So the end result, 60% of my education throughout the course came from independent research. I kept having to study more. I kept having to do more in order to get through the courses in a reasonable amount of time because I felt like either I wasn't doing enough or I wasn't getting it enough. But I didn't settle on the idea that I usually settle on, which was if I wasn't good at something, then I'll focus on what I'm good at and not worry about it.
Great. Thank you both. What was it like transitioning to having to learn something new and challenging like coding? And I know you came from the data science program, Sarah, and Dwayne, you're from the software engineering program. But really that idea of learning something new that was challenging. I mean, a boot camp is challenging regardless of the pace that you're going at with it. So what was it like making that transition to learning something new and challenging? I love panelists because it's always like, are you going to go? Are you going to go? Like, it's just.
I know I went first last time, so I think it's Dwayne's turn this time.
Okay.
My default rule is ladies first.
Oh, that is very kind. I don't want to step on your time. I'll go quickly. Oh, goodness. Geez. I guess oh, sorry. Just having a moment. Like completely forgetting the question because I'm just a little bit like end of my day and also
So
nervous.
to reiterate the question, because like usual, I put a lot of words around one simple question, which was, what was it like transitioning to having to learn something new and challenging?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, I think that it required a little bit of a shift in a lot of respects, actually. So not so little of a shift. Um, because I'd gotten really used to in my life, and I don't know, Dwayne, if you can relate, maybe this idea that just by applying enough time, like if I just kept myself on for long enough, I was gonna fix it. I was gonna make it happen. Not to say that you don't need that kind of stamina, right? But it actually was the first time in my life that I realized that I needed to take really significant breaks. Like I had to go out and take walks throughout my day as a way of giving my brain a little bit of rest. Because I think prior to this, although I'd done a lot of things that I would consider to be like intellectually challenging or organizationally challenging, um, they didn't require the same kind of intellectual stamina. And so learning how to actually care for myself a little bit better became really vital to my success.
It was exceptionally challenging for me, especially because I came in with unrealistic expectations. I felt like, oh, I knew all this about computers before. That was Windows 98, by the way. But I felt like I knew all this about computers before that I should be able to get in there and be able to tackle it quickly. So that imagine my surprise when I'm getting through these courses and after a certain level, I'm not getting it. I'm going through the exercises, no problem. I'm getting to the lab or the testing part of it, and I'm failing, or my version of failing. I had to be honest with myself. I had to that was very, very difficult. I had to stop lying to myself about my skills and the expectations behind them and really just get to work. But another thing I learned was busy work is not effective work. It takes effective work. And I actually learned that through coding because when you get started, you'll build these insane functions with 1,000 lines that's supposed to do one simple thing. And then you learn over time that, you find a way to shrink it and make it simpler. But it was the same thing with my time. Find a way to shrink it and make it simpler. Instead of focusing on learning an entire JavaScript library, I focused on exactly what I needed to learn for the use case I needed and the things associated with it. That too was difficult because we're taught we have to be busy all the time.
That is some solid advice, Dwayne.
As a non-technical person, have not gone through any of these programs, but have now worked with hundreds of students on either the career side or the student advising side of it. I think that in addition to, I think everything that everybody is saying is valid. That is what comes up, especially in the beginning, that piece around busy work and that piece around, if I can just sit here for 5 hours, because that's what I have blocked off, then that is what is going to get me through. And that's sort of that idea of that fixed mindset. And so that shifting into that growth mindset, which both of you illustrated beautifully, is what can I take that I know and apply it maybe in a different way? Or what am I learning about my work style, my workflow, how I'm learning that's going to keep me going towards that either small goals or big picture goals, which again, both of you are illustrating beautifully. But that's something that we as advisors are telling students all the time, like, okay, you have a block of time, but what do you want to do in that block of time? It's not just busy work, it's task, right? So it's both time and tasks, how those go together as puzzle pieces. So so you're validating us on what we're saying to students as well. So so two more questions to guide this, but I'm curious if how the growth mindset, or a time when the growth mindset served you, again, when we're thinking about post graduation, after you finish the program and you're in the job search. I'm curious how that showed up for anybody.
Dwayne, are you waiting for me again? All right. I'm jumping in then. I think job search is my least favorite part of any phase of my life. It's always all you have. I mean, I think that's when you have to embody growth mindset the most, because regardless of what you're doing, you're seeking a kind of validation and you need to be strong for that in such a real way. And then when you are starting something new, you are being confronted with all kinds of challenges on the daily, from how do you even, from very little things like what is the social dynamic in my workplace now, to very large things like how do I figure out a very specific technical problem. So I am going to say that growth mindset for me has a lot to do with stamina and the belief that, like, with enough persistence, I can really accomplish almost anything that I set my mind to. But I think it also has a lot to do with like getting much more comfortable with the idea of my own humanity, aka like we all make mistakes, and that requesting help or acknowledging that you don't know how to do something, or having a mistake that you fess up to, is just part of being a good leader, honestly. And that doing that gracefully gives yourself more emotional and intellectual energy to move on to your next bigger, better thing. So that's kind of where I try to refocus myself in those moments, those inevitable moments when you are feeling very pressed up against a wall, very low or very unsuccessful in a venture. I do try to remember to give myself room to, again, just be the human that we all are, right? So it makes it a little bit easier for me to then move through, right? Because who isn't going to goof up sometimes?
And I definitely agree with you on that, Sarah. Hearing you had me think about my biggest struggle when it came to growth. And I was fortunate. I had a very good friend of mine who was very successful, who was mentoring me. And he helped me point out something important. When I first started out the program, I came to him and asked him advice to get the best out of it. And he said, well, it's not really about the program, it's more about you. And something you got to consider is what have you done for the last 10 years? And this comes into the way of one, interchangeable skills, but also interchangeable habits. So I started out in warehousing, and I'm not sure if any of you worked in a warehouse, but your work is pretty much done independently. You're not like in an office setting or anything like that. You're in your own space, whether you're in a truck, whether you're on a machine, you're working by yourself. I went from that to being a field service technician, which again, you're a part of a team, but you're essentially working by yourself. And then come into this field and the studying it takes, especially at a time frame where everything was virtual, I was doing it by myself. And he said, you're pretty much signing up for the cliche programmer who's a shut-in. You're already introverted. You like being on your motorcycle more than being around groups. You want to work on your people skills. And so I did, but I did it as an introvert. Well, I will say this. It is important to ask for help. It's not even that it's important, it's necessary. Nobody has built the perfect app by themselves. Nobody has built the perfect technology by themselves. Nobody has progressed in the world by themselves. One of the biggest arguments I'd like to put up was that everyone said no man is an island, and I used to try to prove them wrong. That would be the worst mistake you would make in this field. Nobody does it alone. I mean, you can research the greats that made this field what it is today. None of them did it alone. You hear a lot about Steve Jobs, but learn about Steve Wozniak, was it? Can't remember his last name. Haven't heard it in a while. But nobody does it alone. It's almost necessary that you bring people in, but bring them in the right way. It's not about bringing them in to answer all the questions for you. It's bringing them to express the problem and the solutions you've tried, so they know what solutions to offer. And through that, that's how you both grow. Sometimes it'll be you coming to them a lot for solutions. Sometimes you'll teach them something. And that was my experience through Flatiron. I don't even know who my appointed advisor was at this point, because I bothered everybody. Like if they, especially if they were going through my labs, obviously they know something, I bothered them. And from that, that's how I learned a lot. And I just had to be willing to socialize. Now, coming out of the program, it was that plus more. Now it's just not technologists, it's recruiters. It's honestly, if you want to do it right, you're not only talking to recruiters, you're not only talking to software engineers. Sometimes you're talking to salespeople. You just want to know why they're so interested in this company, why they are so excited about it, what makes it so cool. If you really want to learn about the culture, just don't go to the people who are doing the things that you're going to do, or the people who are interacting with the people you're going to interact with. Diversity of thought is what makes you intelligent. So go to the people who think differently from you, who speak differently from you. You'd be surprised just how much you can learn just by listening to someone who you completely disagree with. And I've heard those arguments. You'll hear it all the time. People are so biased about frameworks, about what language they're going to use and stuff. But by learning from them, I prefer front end. I've had to learn a lot from back end people to really understand how to progress. You will learn how to do front end better.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you both. I think that, as always, I think you're making some really good points. So the last question here, and then we can open it up for attendees, is just anything that we haven't covered, any sort of tips or tricks that you want to share with people as yes, growth mindset and fixed mindset is sort of our lens today, but that idea of thinking tech, any tips and tricks that you have for our attendees?
This time I say experience before ladies.
To even stay on the subject of growth mindset and fixed mindset, the biggest thing I've learned in order to be able to apply it effectively enough is to live your life that way and understand when and how to live your life that way. I know we all want to get to a place where we're making that income we want and we're very comfortable in life, but I challenge you to sit down and think about what your life would be like if you really got comfortable and things stayed the same. As a technologist, you're going to do research. If you want to research some advanced technology, look at cars from horses. It was said that when Henry Ford was talking about why he came up with cars in the first place, he said, well, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And that's a fixed mindset. I'm used to the way things are. I want to keep things the way they are. You can do that all you want. You'll be the only one stuck with a horse. It's an inevitable thing in life that we have to understand. There's always going to be advancement. There's always going to be growth. The challenges can seem like a problem unless you change your mindset about it. Without challenges, we wouldn't have thought to innovate. Challenges are opportunities to recognize what needs to change and what needs to be better. And the best way we can do that is to actually solve problems for ourselves. Solve a technology problem for yourself or something you're interested in. For example, I was passionate with Jarvis. I struggled deeply with backend, so I got into AI, and I'm now a lot better with backend. And I still haven't built my own Jarvis, but I'm a lot better than where I was. And obviously, I'm still failing at it, but the fact is that the plan was to see about building Jarvis. You want to keep going on what's meaningful to you, you'll find interest in what's difficult. And it's necessary to do so because you have to face what's difficult in order to proceed.
I'm going to sort of second that to a large degree and just say that I think that being really flexible and following your interests and having patience are three maybe really key aspects to finding yourself in a position that works for you. I think it's pretty challenging to land your dream job right off the bat. And from other grads that I've spoken with and other people that I know in tech, it can take a minute to find exactly the right thing, but pursuing your interests in the meantime and being really persistent with your networking. So sort of to echo again what Dwayne was saying is just been proven to be successful like time after time, and so many examples well beyond my own experience across all different kinds of people. So I would say that, you know, meeting the world and the job market where it is and being prepared to, like, again, be patient and work hard for your ultimate goal is gonna help you to reach that ultimate goal, I think, immeasurably.
Definitely. Definitely. Let's see if does anybody in our, thank you both very much. Are there any questions for our panelists from our attendees? Feel free to go ahead and you can either put that in the chat, you can raise your hand. I think you can just unmute yourself. Yesenia, tell me if I'm wrong with that.
You can't unmute yourself, but I am seeing one Q&A from Robert for you two, asking about how long after you graduated did you find a job?
I started working about 2 months after graduation full time.
Oh, you're muted, Dwayne.
Thank you.
Okay.
For me, it was about 6 months, but I was exceptionally picky.
He was. I can attest to that in a very good way. In a very good way.
I will say this from the many people I've networked with and the many people I've met. It's important to take your dream into your own hands and let your job support it, and not let them be in charge of your dream. No one is sitting you down and asking you what your dream is. It's your responsibility. You leave your job to do that, and their company direction becomes your dream.
Great. Any other questions that our audience has, or anything that's coming through, Yesenia, that I'm not seeing?
I'm not seeing anything else in the Q&A. But please, yeah, if you have a question, drop it in the chat.
Perfect. Yeah, go right ahead, Dwayne.
I was going to ask if I could share a thought.
Yeah, please.
So I'm trying to strip myself down here because I'm used to, of course, being more of a more widespread personal consultant. But something that comes down in everybody I have a conversation with, no matter what field they're in, no matter what their focus is confidence. Confidence is a huge thing. And it seems like whether or not someone is growth focused or whether they have a fixed mindset. And of course, they have their roles. Sometimes you need to focus on putting yourself in a box and getting good at one thing. And sometimes you need to realize that this box is holding you back and you need to think beyond the box. But confidence plays the biggest role. And at the end of the day, we don't realize that there's part of us that sees a part of ourselves separately. And just like with someone else, when someone else proves themselves untrustworthy, when someone doesn't follow through, when someone doesn't communicate properly, we might still respect them, we might still love them, but we feel a bit of an apprehension with them. And that's just one person. We live with ourselves every day. Every time we set a goal and we don't accomplish it, every time we say we're going to and we don't, we say, oh, I'm going to keep myself to this restriction and stop eating this kind of food, and you don't, you think poorly of your decisions and you think less of yourself. And that's what kills your confidence. You start to think, I'm a loser because I made this choice, because you'll think someone else is a loser because they made that choice. The real key to fixing that confidence is to start keeping promises to yourself. Make them smaller, make them simpler, start keeping them so you can get those wins and building that. You are more than capable of accomplishing this. Most of you have succeeded in some kind of field. It's not about being good in tech. It's about understanding what helped you win and applying it to tech. If they wanted people that can code perfectly, well, they can stick to computers, they can do it well. They want people who can solve problems in a way that is about their unique experiences.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Oh, I was trying to share my screen. Of course, I didn't do it. Well, give me 1 second. I just want to put our thank you slide up there to make sure if anybody wants our contact information. But of course, I'm not able to do it. So I will just say thank you. And so I want to thank you publicly, obviously, Sarah and Dwayne, for your time, for your talent, coming back and sharing your experience. Again, it is, again, a full circle moment to see both of you, doing what you set out to do, and having been a part of that journey at different points in time. And so again, thank you so much for coming back and sharing this with our Flatiron School community. Thank you everyone for joining us. Again, there is no right way. There's no right mindset, I guess. The fixed mindset versus growth mindset, neither one is the right way. And as we're thinking about career changers moving into thinking like a tech professional in the modality or the discipline that you are in and what you're trying to do, there's a time and place for each of those, and being open to building on what has worked for you before. If you're coming from a set career, you're going to be the new kid on the block again, at lots of different points in time. And so recognizing that feels sort of incongruent sometimes, right? And so having that growth mindset to be able to move through that, being open to using new ways of thinking about yourself, building that confidence, not just those external things. So, if there's ever anything that we can do, definitely reach out to your advisor. You can find us at advising@flatironschool.com. Definitely reach out to your Flatiron School community, whether that is your cohort, your instructors, the technical coaches that are around, people in community on Yesenia's team. Those we're all here. We want to see you be successful. Again, whether you are thinking about starting out, you're just starting out, or you're just getting ready to go into that job search, we wish you the very best of luck. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Again, thank you to Sarah and Dwayne. We absolutely appreciate your time and talent on this. So glad that you are able to be living what you want to be doing as your career. So I will sign off here. Thank you all so very much, and I hope you have a great night. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Really nice meeting you guys. Thanks again. Bye.
Bye-bye.